AI is evolving fast. Are you ready? Meet AI at FlytBase, your weekly hub to learn, upskill, and stay ahead in AI world. Let's dive into today's session.
Many of us across different industry, we must be experiencing very similar problem what we have solved at FlytBase. Primarily, how do we find the right buyer in the fast moving space when most of the signals are actually fragmented, right? So when we are talking about buyer, there can be different personas for each industries. From FlytBase perspective, these are either the system integrator, drone service provider, or the actual enterprises who are deploying drones. So some of the key challenges that I wanted to talk about is, first of all, in this fast moving space, when we are talking about signals, they are distributed across different channels, whether it is the kind of LinkedIn post that maybe a buyer is posting after they have done the deployment, or maybe it is happening at a particular event where they are talking about some implementation, or it could be some of the buyers who are actually filing for a waiver and then trying to secure those kind of licenses to fly drone. If you correlate to the other industries, I'm sure there are parallels where this kind of signals are distributed across different ways, and then we need to find out how can we actually capture those signals to identify where are the real buyers. The second one is, when we are talking about this distributed signal, it is also important to consider that we are not losing too much of a BD bandwidth in terms of finding out those opportunities. And this is where, how do we reach out to those right numbers of different personas of buyers, whether they are reaching out in terms of the right pitches that we are making to them, whether we are reaching out to those events where they are present. And at the same time, when we are consuming the BD time, are we providing them with the right context? And that moves to the third point, where when we are reaching out, it needs to be contextual so that we are directly hitting the nail on the head and sharing the context, what they actually wanted to listen. So it doesn't become like any other outreach or cold email, which is having low context and people tend to ignore it. So those are the three challenges where we wanted to try and address it, especially from a drone perspective or from FlytBase perspective. And this is where we have been trying to take an approach which is not reactive, where we are missing on those signals or we feel that those signals have been dated, but rather we capture them early in the stage and find out how can we provide those contextual information and reach out to those set of people who may be a prospect or a buyer. So just giving a quick glimpse in terms of how we have designed the overall engine, which is where we have been thinking in terms of capturing those signals, identifying those right personas, enriching them with the help of AI scoring, at the same time also identifying the relevant contacts and then taking out those contacts in terms of creating a very, very contextual outreach prioritizations, and at the same time, then drafting it across different tools. So in this entire process, we have been leveraging a lot of homegrown application, but at the same time, leveraging other tools. For example, when we are talking about contact enrichment, there are several tools that we have leveraged in the form of Apollo or Hunter, but at the same time, for outreach campaign, we have used tools like Lemlist and other. So with that context setting, I would like to quickly jump into a quick demo. This is a demo version, demo mode. None of this information is actually any of the confidential FlytBase client information. And what I'm showing at the moment is a view where we have multiple tabs. I would start with the first one, which we are calling as a social listening. So there are two aspects to it. The first one is where we are trying to, first of all, capture those signals. Where are those set of buyers who are talking about a particular signal, right? So in context of FlytBase, we are talking about maybe a DJI dock partner. And how do we reach out to them? So who are talking about DJI dock is a kind of a signal, but it could be varied depending upon the industry that you are operating in. So across different places, the one that we are showcasing here is the Google News and LinkedIn. There can be different parameters that we can set across in order to find out how much of depth that we want, right? So when we are doing with Google News, what we have learned is that there are RSS feed, which we can configure, and it can be done across different regions. And those feeds typically gives you 20 odd articles, depending upon whether you really find that keyword or not. So in the interest of time, I would not run the Google News, which is relatively easier. I would try and showcase how we have done it for LinkedIn. Again, the keyword remain the same. And what we have done is the headless browser in the form of Puppeteer implementation. I would like to make it visible and show you how it runs. So typically what it does is under the hood, it actually opens up a headless browser, which goes and scan for this keyword. There can be one or more keywords that we can do. To keep it simple, I'm just making it with one keyword. It does the internal scanning, find out all the articles that may be relevant to us and create a list, and that list get populated. So it would run for a few seconds until it finds all the articles, and then it eventually puts that into a bucket. This is where the second step would kick in, which is where we would be doing some kind of an AI scoring. The intention is that we do not want the low signal noise to come in. And the AI scoring actually helps us in terms of getting a better scored article, which are more meaningful, whether they are talking about some implementation, deployment, and things like that. So once this process complete, we get that into a queue, and this is where the queue keep going. And for the matter of fact, it's going to be taking slightly longer because it's going to be collecting up the information. But I would show you the one that I've run yesterday. This is the kind of list that you would see. And in this, you would see that there are articles and Google News that are coming up. Now, the most important point in here is that we just don't collect those articles, but we try to extract the meaningful information out of it. And this is making it more intuitive, where it should not be just what does this signal do for us, but we wanted to ensure that we try and make it meaningful for the BD team to understand that this is the context and why we should be looking at this particular information. So just giving a quick glimpse, this is where we get some kind of an AI summary. We have been using different AI models, Gemini and OpenAI, to extract some of the information from the LinkedIn article. What region, what signal, which companies are being involved, all are being captured here. It also captures up the industry and other relevant details, which are equally important. Some of the actionable items out of this is, what do we do with this information? Do we want it to engage with this particular person or entity? We can quickly generate maybe an AI response depending upon what is the context of the article. We can send it internally within Slack group for the leadership as well as the relevant people to know about this. We can bookmark it to maybe create a newsletter at the end of the month in terms of showcasing who are the parties who are talking about this particular signal and so on. So this is primarily the social listening side of it, which is one of the element. It continued to expand into different areas where we could go out and talk about which are the other places where we can find out those signals. So we have been trying to find out those signals across, let's say, who has applied for waiver or who has been participating into particular events. And then there are different other sources that we have used in order to find out. I would like to take your attention into some other areas. For example, this is one of the set where we have identified across different data sources who are the partners. Again, this is a dummy data, so I have restricted it to only a limited number of elements. And you can have it separated based upon different personas. Again, using certain logics, we have scored them to create a scoring mechanics to divide them into high, medium, and low. A lot of information can come out of this where a BD person or a person who wanted to go for an outreach can look into the important information, including whether this particular entity has anything that we can consume from a particular procurement perspective or an implementation or a deployment perspective. Who are the point of contact that we can reach out? The one that I was talking about in the previous slide, where this kind of enrichment can be done with the products like Apollo and Hunter. There are evidence links that we also capture that gives us an idea of where do we find this particular information, just to indicate that there are no hallucination from AI, but at the same time, we can cross-verify why this particular signal is more relevant. And if somebody wanted to get more information, all those details can be captured. Along with the other important information, which industry, which vertical, what use case, how many employees for this particular organization, and so on. Again, these are all dummy data, but at the same time, this kind of information makes it super easy and give the person in the team all the relevant information to move to a next step. Consuming this information can actually be all the context that is required in order to go out and talk to this particular person. So giving another view is where, we have automated to an extent where an email automatically can be drafted based upon the context, right? So this is another version where email draft can be generated based upon the context and the evidence that we have. And this can be connected to the outreach applications like Limlist, where all those details can be finalized here, but the actual outbound can be run using these applications like Limlist. So think it like a funnel where you have all the signals as well as the intelligence and the enrichment done into this kind of an application, which simplify the overall review process and a QA process. But at the same time, you can run the outreach whether directly through your inbox or through an application like Limlist. So these are different elements and different dissections of the information where we wanted to, understand how a growth hacking application would look like and what are the different data sources that we can consume. And we have done it across different data sources where we have consumed those data sources, dissected them into what are the potential buyers, use our algorithm for classifying them into high, medium, and low, and then enrich them before we start the outreach campaign. So this is a quick overview. We have got some basic analytics developed so far in terms of understanding from a leaderboard perspective, if a particular company or a partner has been very active on social, who are they? How are they being ranked on the leaderboard? And that gives us again an impression that these are the most active partners or prospect that we should be engaging with them, since we are finding them more often talking about their implementations or deployments across different social medias. Similarly, we can derive different types of analytics that talks about who are most active in a particular regions or for a particular industry or for a particular vertical. And that covers my basic, I would say, overview. There are certain tools and agents that we have also created in the process. And I would give you a quick demo about one of the tool where, let's say we have done the social listing, but there are opportunities where we might know that for certain litmus tests, which are those companies where potentially we might know that these are also potential buyers, but how do we quickly analyze them without actually manually reviewing their website or maybe scanning through their LinkedIn post and others. So there are certain agents that we have created that sits under our utilities, and then we eventually use them for maybe doing a quick QA or searching on one-on-one. So one of the example is, let's say there is a company 24/7 Drone Force, and if you wanted to just check for if they have anything to do with DJI Dock, again, pretty much using a similar tech stack, but it does a different use case where we can go internally into a particular I would say handle of a particular company, or maybe we can scan even a company website just for a particular keyword, and it counts those keyword and give us the result back. That's another way of verifying whether we are getting the right signal and these are the right set of buyers that we should be reaching out. So those are some of the tools that actually help us in terms of finding out that we are dealing with the right signals, and those signals actually help us in order to validate and then enrich those contexts for the outreach. That eventually helps in terms of a better ROI, and the amount of resources that we use for conversions should be minimized, and we automate the entire process. I take a pause at this point for any questions, and would like to hear from you.
We do have a first question. Which tools are used for the social listening? You mentioned Atlas browser and LLMs for scoring. How does the scraping happens?
Sure. So I think there are two tools that we are using. One is for Google search. This is basically, I would say, a very basic utility where we are using the RSS feed from Google News, right? And as I was explaining, there are different regions for which we have prioritized. I again show my screen. So there are 16 odd regions that we have thought that we would be more interested in, and some of them are listed here, but we can select individually. And that way, Google News feed, the RSS feed, can be specifically targeted for a particular region. So that's number one. The second one is for LinkedIn. And for LinkedIn, we have used the headless browser, a PTR implementation. This actually runs in a very interesting way where we can parameterize by certain keywords. We can also parameterize based on a date range. This is a limitation on a LinkedIn site that they have not exposed those API for scraping. And that's why this kind of a headless browser implementation actually help in terms of scraping the LinkedIn, and at times they keep blocking it. So we have to be cautious that we are not actually compromising on any of our actual handle. And they keep changing the DOM structure as well. So again, a cautious there that it needs to be actively looked upon. Otherwise, many a times those cookie get expired or those DOM structure keep changing, and the implementation might needs to be tweaked a little bit in order to function correctly. So that was on to the social listening side. And the second part of your question is when you're talking about the LLMs for scoring, we have used both of them, Gemini 2.5 Pro, and the second one is Open AI 4.1. Does that answer your question, Abhishek? All right.
Okay, we do have another question. What kind of AI models are you using for signal classification, prioritization, or summarization? And how do you decide between off-the-shelf versus custom?
Okay. All right. Interesting one. So I believe, this was more on a trial side. What I notice is that for me, particularly when I'm doing more of a research work, I've noticed that if I do it using, if I do it using Comet kind of a browser, that gives me excellent result. But in order to do it at scale and more into an integrated way, while Comet, it needs to, I have to take the file out, I have to take the data out, and then give it to Comet and bring that data in, which is more of an offline. I have been very satisfied with the work done by Gemini. And primarily, it has helped me in terms of doing a good research. At the same time, it has created those kind of, I would say, JSON data structure for me, where I have categorized the key elements, whether there is a mention of DJI dock, whether there is a mention of BB loss, and so on, right? And those elements are particularly useful when we are doing a scoring. So I believe your question is mixed of a few smaller questions in there. So the first one is, yes, we are using Gemini AI model, and this has been very particularly useful for us, especially for classification and research work of it. The prioritization is primarily based upon those data points that we have got, right? So if we have got a data point that is more meaningful, we have given a score of 3 out of 3. Otherwise, it goes from 0, 1, and 2. And at the same time, when it comes to consolidating all this, it adds up into a particular score, and that defines high, medium, low slabs for it. I didn't get your second part of the question where you are saying between off the shelf and custom, but let me make an attempt where you are saying, can this entire product be off the shelf? And honestly, we haven't seen something that could be customized or that could be created this kind of, I would say, social listening as well as growth hacking tool. And that's why we thought that it's far more easier as well as more appropriate for us to make it the way we want it, right? And especially the data sources, many a time those data sources are not easy to get. They are not consistent. They have different data formats and so on. So it certainly need that kind of a customization, and that's where we have built in-house.
Okay, so the next question is from Anshul. How much time it took to build this tool starting from ideation phase to till today?
Okay, I think there are different modules. Some of the modules have taken longer, while some of the modules were relatively easier. I would say in terms of quantifying for exact number of days, you can say that it roughly around 4 weeks of time to build it across different modules. Interestingly, there are certain part of the processes which are more expensive, especially on the data sourcing side, data cleaning side, and then loading those data into an appropriate structure. The rest of the engine was pretty automated, where once you get those data set, how can you classify those data using the 4-step approach? The first step was, first of all, get the schema right. Second, get the scoring right. Third, and get the enrichment right. And fourth is the outreach plan.
Next question is, I handle a lot of vendor, partner, and ops work day to day. How much would you recommend scope first social intelligence radar so it stays lightweight but still useful?
Yeah, I think start with social intelligence radar. At least that gives you an idea in terms of who is your ideal customer, right? And that way you can start thinking whether you are hitting to them which regions are most of your inquiries coming in, whether this is for a particular vertical or so on. So I'm not sure about your industry, but I think this kind of a social listening saves a lot of efforts in terms of you going and spending, let's say, 60 minutes every day in terms of going through those different Twitter handles or LinkedIn handle and then just manually scanning them. But this can generate actually a report for you in order to get all those required partner profile or prospect into one bucket.
I hope that answers your question. Uh, Next question is from how do you handle false positive signals that look important but don't lead to any meaningful action and reduce them over time?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a fantastic question. And I believe over a period of time, what we have done is fine tune the overall system. In the early days, there have been certain false positives when we have been actually trying to look into certain keywords. Those keywords have been scattered around different, I would say, applications. At the same time, they may have different ways of expressing. For example, not, when we are looking out for, let's say, a keyword of DJI dock, at times the doc has been mentioned in different forms, right? And it could be a doc of any type. And that is where we started getting some, I would say, junk or spam. And we have started fine tuning where we wanted to ensure that these are the strict keywords. At the same time, there have been uses of this keyword, but not necessarily into the main article. They may have been into the left side panel, or they may be just a shop which may be just selling a particular a DJI dock application, and they may not be necessarily high signal for us. And this is where we have gone an extra step in terms of giving a score, and that score has actually helped us in terms of classifying those high, medium, and low. So if there are 3 or 4 different signals that we are interested in, and if we are getting all of those signals, they automatically become high. But if we are getting low of those signals, then we try to keep them as low priority.
Okay. So the next question is, are there any guardrails or review steps you recommend so teams don't blindly act on AI suggested insights?
This is a brilliant one. And I think, yes, exactly. There needs to be guardrails. So particularly what has helped us, I would say there are 2 things that I would like to highlight. The first is when we had talked about the evidence URLs, right? I think I was showing this particular one where we got an article where we got, let's say, a particular company found out, and then there are evidence links, right? So these are the evidence links. I think I was showing it in here. How can we, first of all, rely on this evidence link? So this was the first blind spot where some of those links get hallucinated and we just get a dummy link. So I have to structure this in a way where, I ensure that the prompt actually goes and check those particular link. So I have a QA agent that I have built where the instruction to that QA agent is to actually go and extract a prompt or extract a snippet from this particular evidence link, so that I know that this particular snippet link is coming from this link, and that means this link is not hallucinated, right? So this was very important for us, where it should not be any dummy URL. And extracting that line item from this evidence link automatically ensure that this links work, right? That was the first one where we have tried to see that AI is not throwing garbage at us. The second guardrail is actually not just restricting AI to find out one, but rather forcing the AI to go deeper and find out more links, and across not just one source, but across different sources. And on top of it, the QA agent that I was talking about, this was an additional utility where once we have, let's say, a questionable outcome, we can verify using another pair of agent, which can actually help in terms of verifying that this information is robust and we are not getting hallucinated or with the junk information coming in directly from the model. One more thing that I've tried to do is that for certain processes, we have run it across different models. So at times we have used Cloud AI, but at the same time we have given the same prompt to OpenAI. We have given the same prompt to Comet, and try to see if we are getting overlapping information. If we have got the overlapping information across different tools, that gives us more assurance that these are high candidates and we should be looking forward to those information and evidences.
So we have a next question from Kunal. Can you walk through end-to-end architecture of radar you are demoing today? Sources, processing layer, model usage, and how the final insights are delivered.
I think it's it's going to be a complete session again if you wanted
Yeah.
to do it at depth. I would rather keep it at high level and see in case if this can help you, Kunal. The idea of the radar was actually what are your key sources that you are interested in, and each industry may demand different data sources. Once you get those data sources, how are you storing those data sources in a very structured schema? Once you store them, then the real work start where you need to go into the data details. You need to find out what are those signals that are important for you, score those signals, create your high, medium, low kind of candidates. And then once you have those high, medium, low candidate, go to the next step of identifying who are the potential buyers or people that you need to connect to them, enrich those contacts, take them for take the contextual information from your step number 2, and then use your outreach expertise in terms of reaching out to those candidates.
Next question is from Hed. How do you define and implement relevance so that the system don't become another noisy thread?
Yeah, I think we have covered that in some of the previous questions, right? I think you need to ensure that AI do not hallucinate, and you have to provide those kind of QA agents as well as guardrails in order to get the noise, subtracted from overall solution.
Okay. So Ajit have asked, can you share a specific example where this kind of platform helped the team spot a partner or a customer opportunity earlier than competitors, and what the workflow looked like end to end?
Yeah, so I think I would again go back to first part of the question, second part of the question we just discussed. So the first part of question is where, if we are getting those signals earlier, the opportunity here is that we actually have an opportunity to react fast, right? Instead of waiting for those things to appear maybe in more than one media and then we react to it, or if somebody comes and tell us about this particular implementation in a given region and then react to it, how can this actually be useful for us to go faster and scan those opportunities? So as an example, let's say if somebody is filing for a waiver, can that waiver candidate be identified? And then we can reach out to them in order to understand that, yes, these are potential buyers or these are potential prospects for us. And that is the kind of opportunity that we are talking about. If we correlate to any other industry, maybe in finance or maybe, let's say in travel, right? Similar opportunity, if somebody is booking an airline ticket, the travel insurance becomes an obvious cross-sale opportunity there, right? How do you identify those opportunities where you get the signals for somebody who is buying an airline ticket, right? I think on a similar line, you can correlate this where identifying those data sources and then getting those signals out captured quickly. And we have been benefiting in terms of scanning through different data sources for different, I would say, use cases, and then capturing those signals and sharing it with the team members in order to reach out to them.